In April of 2026, this very same HOA board put out a newsletter that essentially called the approaching El Niño weather pattern a probable but uncertain threat.
Right, just a we're watching it's kind of thing.
Yeah. Exactly. The vibe was very much, we'll keep an eye on it. But then, fast forward to May 30th, and every major global forecasting authority has upgraded this to a near certainty. The tone just completely flipped from casual observation to tactical defense.
Yeah, it was a massive pivot.
So, I mean, what exactly changed so violently in 30 days to make a local HOA treasurer sound like a military general?
Well, the forecasting models didn't just align, they aggressively spiked in a way you rarely see in climatology.
Really?
Yeah, getting consensus across international agencies usually takes time. But the May data was just undeniable. In April, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, had the probability of an El Niño emerging at about 62%.
Okay, so slightly better than a coin toss.
Right. But by mid-May, that shot up to 82% for summer. And then a staggering 96% chance of an active, highly disruptive El Niño persisting through the peak winter months.
Wow, 96% of forecasting is essentially a guarantee.
It is. And it wasn't just an American agency sounding the alarm either. The International Research Institute for Climate and Society at Columbia University, the IRI, they released an independent model assigning a 97 to 98% probability through the end of 2026.
That is just insane alignment.
Yeah, and the World Meteorological Organization, the European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts, or ECMWF, they all published identical conclusions.
Wow.
So seeing that alphabet soup of global agencies lock in on a single severe outcome, it just completely changes the conversation.
Yeah.
From, if this happens, to a very grim, how do we survive it?
That makes total sense. And, I'm looking at this Super El Niño term the HOA treasurer keeps throwing around in the report.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought El Niño just meant, it's going to rain a lot in California. Is there an actual physical difference here, or is super just a marketing term meteorologists use to get people to pay attention?
No, there is a very strict physical metric that separates a standard El Niño from a super event. To really understand it, we have to look at the baseline ocean mechanics.
Okay.
So under normal conditions, strong trade winds blow east to west across the Pacific Ocean. They push the warm surface water away from the Americas toward Asia.
Got it.
But during an El Niño, those winds weaken. And in severe cases, they actually reverse.
So all that warm water basically just sloshes back across the ocean toward California and South America.
Exactly. And that sloshing effect completely rewires the atmosphere. The massive heat radiating off that displaced ocean water, it warms the air above it, creating this colossal thermal roadblock in the sky.
A thermal roadblock.
Yeah, this high-pressure dome. And it forces the normal west-to-east flow of the jet stream to buckle. It dives south, acting like a giant atmospheric scoop that picks up massive amounts of tropical moisture and slingshots it directly at the southwestern United States.
Okay, that makes sense of the mechanics, but what actually pushes it into the super category?
It comes down to sea surface temperature anomalies. If the temperature in a specific equatorial Pacific region, known as Niño 3.4, exceeds 2.0 degrees Celsius above normal, it officially triggers the Super El Niño classification.
2 degrees. It doesn't sound like a lot, but for an ocean, that's huge, right?
It's massive. Historically, we've only seen 3 of these in recorded history: 1982 to 83, 97 to 98, and 2015 to 16.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the May 2026 data showed that hitting that plus 2.0 degree threshold was the most probable outcome. Even more alarming, the ECMWF models hinted that peak anomalies could reach or exceed 3.0 degrees Celsius above normal.
Which would just shatter historical records.
Completely. What's fascinating here is the data coming from beneath the surface of the ocean. Surface temperatures are just the visible symptom. The true engine of the storm is the subsurface heat content.
Like deep underwater.
Right. The report notes that at depths of 50 to 150 meters, water temperatures were running 4 to 7 degrees Celsius above normal.
Wait, 7 degrees above normal?
Yeah. Scientists at the California Institute for Water Resources stated these subsurface anomalies were among the largest ever recorded. They were holding more than twice the energy reservoir seen at the exact same point in 2023.
Let me see if I'm picturing this right. It's like a hidden planetary scale battery deep underwater that's been overcharging in the dark for months.
I like that.
And when the ocean finally plugs into the atmosphere this winter, it's going to power a massive, unstoppable heat engine.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. That buried energy has to go somewhere, right? And when it releases, it supercharges everything. It intensifies frontal wind systems and drastically increases the frequency and volume of atmospheric rivers.
Let's define that term really quickly because atmospheric river sounds almost poetic, but the reality is much heavier. We are talking about a literal conveyor belt of water vapor in the sky, right?
Essentially, yes. It's a dense, narrow band of moisture traveling through the lower atmosphere. Some of these sky rivers carry more water than the flow at the mouth of the Mississippi River.
That is terrifying.
And when that vapor hits the coastal mountains of California, it is forced upward, cools rapidly, and drops all that water at once.
So you have this massive sky river carrying the equivalent of the Mississippi, and it's being pointed like a fire hose at a place famous for its bone-dry heat.
Exactly.
I mean, why is a community built for endless sunshine so uniquely vulnerable to this specific ocean anomaly?
The vulnerability lies in the desert paradox. The Coachella Valley averages less than 3 inches of rain for an entire year, and because it is so perpetually dry, the desert soils develop a condition called hydrophobicity.
Okay, I know hydrophobic means water repelling, but mechanically, why does dirt repel water?
So desert vegetation, like creosote bushes,
Mhm.
they have thick, oily leaves to survive the extreme climate.
Right.
When those plants bake in 110-degree heat for months on end, those natural plant oils vaporize and settle directly into the dirt. It creates a literal waxy crust over the earth.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Yeah. So when you try to pour water onto it, it's like trying to pour water onto a candle. The water cannot absorb. It just beads up and runs off immediately.
And under a Super El Niño scenario, this HOA report notes the region could receive 200 to over 350% of its normal rainfall.
Yes.
They could literally get their entire annual average dropped on that waxy dirt in a single multi-day event.
Which means the runoff is instantaneous and violent. The valley is ringed by the massive Santa Rosa and San Jacinto Mountains, which act like these steep stone funnels.
Okay.
When an atmospheric river hits those peaks, the water is concentrated down into the valley floor channels in minutes. There is zero warning time.
Right, but looking at the HOA's actual defenses, though, I'm seeing a massive piece of infrastructure mentioned right next to their neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
The Whitewater River Storm Channel has a convergence point called Point Happy right near Highway 111 and Washington Street. The report says this channel is designed to handle approximately 80,000 cubic feet of water per second.
Yeah, that's the theoretical capacity.
Wait, hold on. 80,000 cubic feet per second. That sounds like a massive 100-year flood capacity. I mean, shouldn't they be perfectly safe? If I had a drain that big outside my gates, I'd feel fine. Why the panic?
Because trusting the theoretical capacity over the historical reality is a fatal trap for many communities.
Hmm.
And the HOA treasurer actually anticipates that exact false sense of security and counters it with historical data.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, during the 97-98 Super El Niño, which this 2026 event was tracking, to exceed, neighboring cities like Indio, Coachella, and Mecca were completely underwater. And La Quinta experienced severe road isolation despite that channel.
And more recently, they bring up Tropical Storm Hillary in 2023. Palm Springs got nearly a year's worth of rain in 36 hours.
Right.
La Quinta declared a local emergency, vehicles were stranded, roads were buried in thick mud, and the entire valley just ground to a halt.
Because the failure point isn't the channel's peak capacity, it's the sequence of the storms.
The sequence.
Yeah. A Super El Niño isn't one big storm you weather and then recover from. It is a relentless sequence of atmospheric rivers. You might get 3 to 8 inches of rain over 4 days. That saturates the ground, fills the channels, and strains the infrastructure. And then, crucially, the next storm hits just 3 days later.
So there is zero drainage recovery time.
None. The soils stay completely saturated. When that primary 80,000 cubic foot channel reaches its limit, the water has nowhere to go but up and out.
Yikes.
The report documents that secondary sheet flooding across surface streets, specifically Avenue 48 right outside their gates, is a highly predictable outcome.
Man, the moment that water leaves the channel and hits the pavement on Avenue 48, the problem shifts from a macro city planning issue to a deeply personal one for the people trapped inside these homes.
Exactly.
The treasure includes this micro-level threat matrix, and it just paints a picture of a neighborhood built for a climate that suddenly doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, the board strips away the global models for a moment and ruthlessly audits their own built environment.
Take the age of the homes, for example. Built in 2006. So by 2026, you are looking at 20-year-old construction.
Right.
In the desert, Homes use flat or low-slope roofs. They are perfectly fine for shedding 3 inches of rain a year, but after 2 decades of baking in the extreme desert sun, the sealants, the flashings, the caulking around the windows, it all just turns brittle.
It totally degrades.
Yeah, when you introduce a sustained multi-day rainfall event,
Mhm.
water will find every single microscopic crack.
And that's why the report officially upgrades the roof and structure risk from medium to high, because of that structural fatigue.
That makes sense.
They also spotlight the community landscaping. It's full of beautiful desert palms and drought-adapted plants, which have incredibly shallow root systems.
Oh, because they don't need to dig deep for water.
Right, but saturated hydrophobic soil essentially turns to liquid mud. When you combine that with the intensified frontal wind gusts of an El Niño, those massive palm trees will easily topple onto structures and vehicles.
Here's where it gets really interesting from a risk analysis perspective. But honestly, it's also the scariest vulnerability in this entire document. It isn't environmental, it's human.
Yeah.
This is a 55-plus active adult community.
And the demographics completely rewrite the stakes of the disaster. If Avenue 48 floods and becomes impassable, this community, with its single gated entry and exit, becomes a stranded island.
Which is terrifying.
For an average neighborhood, being stuck at home for 3 days is, an inconvenience. You'd eat canned soup and catch up on reading.
But for a senior community, it becomes a life safety issue almost instantly.
Exactly. Extended power outages disrupt life-sustaining medical equipment that requires constant electricity. Isolation means interrupted medication management, because pharmacies cannot deliver and residents cannot safely drive out.
That is so true.
Most importantly, it means emergency medical services, like ambulances, fire trucks, are physically incapable of reaching a resident having a medical crisis if those surface streets are under 2 feet of moving water and thick mud. The vulnerability is exponentially amplified by the age and health needs of the residents.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this hyperlocal report really highlights the invisible fragility of modern living.
Absolutely.
We build these beautiful enclaves assuming the environmental baseline will remain static forever. We assume the roads will always be clear, the power will always be on, and the supply chains will never break.
And perhaps the most glaring example of this invisible fragility, which the treasurer points out with absolute frantic urgency, is the insurance situation.
Yes. Knowing that invisible fragility is about to shatter, the HOA has to build a literal survival timeline. Understanding the threat is one thing, but how does a microgovernment actually mobilize against a macro threat when the clock is ticking so loudly?
They map their local actions directly against the climatology models. The report lays it out bluntly. May and June of 2026 are the only viable preparation windows.
Okay, so just a couple of months.
Right. By July and August, the summer monsoon season brings unpredictable elevated risks, and by September and October, because the Super El Niño accelerates rapidly, the first early atmospheric rivers could arrive.
And December through February is the peak threat window, where they are bracing for that 200 to 350% rainfall anomaly.
So every piece of physical work has to happen before the fall.
What are they actually doing physically?
Well, the board is instructed to immediately commission a professional hydrojetting of all community storm drains, costing between $2,000 to $6,000. They need to blast 20 years of calcified desert debris out of those pipes.
Wow.
They're bringing in arborists to aggressively remove hazard trees. They're ordering the immediate prepositioning of a minimum of 300 sandbags at specific documented low points in the community where water is known to pool.
They are basically fortifying a very sunny castle.
Hold on.
But the part of this action plan that stressed me out the most wasn't the physical labor, it was the insurance trap.
Oh, man.
The treasurer writes, in all caps, that residents need to check their flood coverage immediately. If you are listening to this right now and you assume your standard homeowner's insurance covers flooding from rain, you are almost certainly wrong.
So wrong.
It is a massive blind spot. Because of the National Flood Insurance Program, the NFIP, there is a mandatory 30-day waiting period before a new policy takes effect. If you wait until a storm is forecast on the news to buy flood insurance, it's already too late. You are locked out. I have to ask, how many people actually realize their standard policy won't cover a drop of surface water flooding until they read a memo like this?
Very few. Standard homeowners insurance and even standard HOA master policies explicitly exclude surface water flooding.
Which is why.
If a pipe bursts inside your wall, you're covered. But if rainwater hits the street outside, pools up, and flows under your front door, it is entirely excluded. By July, that 30-day waiting window means anyone waking up to the threat is completely exposed to the early fall storms.
And the HOA itself has a massive financial blind spot they are scrambling to patch too, right?
The reserve fund.
Yeah.
The treasurer's ultimate fail-safe recommendation is securing a massive financial buffer of $50,000 to $100,000 immediately, either in cash reserves or a dedicated line of credit.
Because if the community's common areas get destroyed by mud and water, the HOA has to pay for the restoration out of pocket.
Exactly. In prior Super El Niño events, community-scale restoration in the valley regularly exceeded $200,000.
My gosh.
If the HOA does not have that cash on hand, their only legal recourse is to levy a special assessment. Imagine the absolute cruelty of surviving a regional disaster, dealing with the trauma of your own flooded living room, and then your HOA hands you a mandatory bill for $5,000 due in 30 days just to fix the neighborhood's collapsed retaining wall.
That would be devastating.
The treasurer is demanding this capital immediately to shield a community of seniors from a brutal financial shock in the direct aftermath of a crisis.
It is a stunning piece of foresight. So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive looking at a 149-home desert community. And through their hyper-local lens, we unpacked the near certainty of a historically massive Super El Niño.
Right.
We learned how a hidden planetary battery of subsurface heat anomalies creates a thermal roadblock, bending the jet stream and hurling sequences of atmospheric rivers at the coast.
Yeah.
We explored the desert paradox of waxy hydrophobic soils and the nightmare logistics of a 30-day insurance waiting period.
We really witnessed how survival requires pivoting from trusting a massive 80,000 cubic foot municipal storm channel to independently fortifying 20-year-old flat roofs and calculating the exact topological low points to place 300 sandbags.
Exactly. Whether you live in a gated desert HOA, a high-rise apartment, or a cabin in the woods, preparedness isn't just about owning a flashlight and some extra batteries.
No, not at all.
It's about understanding how global data impacts your specific, localized vulnerabilities long before the sky actually gets dark.
You know, this document exposes a critical question we all have to face.
Yeah.
We saw how the forecasting models dramatically shifted from April to May of 2026, essentially evaporating this community's prep time in a matter of weeks.
Right.
If predictive climate models are now evolving and accelerating faster than our bureaucratic safeguards, like a rigid 30-day insurance waiting period, are our fundamental systems for disaster response simply too slow for the new reality of our climate?
Wow. That is the exact question we all need to be pondering. And it really goes to show the next time you get a mundane-looking letter from your HOA or your city council, you might want to open it right away.
Definitely.
It might just be the survival manual you didn't know you needed. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take a hard look at your own surroundings, do your own risk analysis, and we will catch you next time.